Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another video series. I'm Shay Douglas from the Conscious Evolving Media platform Earth Heroes TV, and I'm back with Jason Reynolds from the Quantum Movement. Today is Thursday, 31st of March, 2022, and there's so much going on with the world, but we really like to focus on personal empowerment, health and well-being, and then how we can bring that in to create conscious communities in these conversations with Jason. So Jason, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's a great pleasure to always have these conversations with you.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you. I really, looking forward to getting into this particular topic, awakening independence, and especially when there's so much, I suppose, invitation to be distracted with what's going on in the world around us.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking to the audience that generally tune into these calls, I would suggest, the vast majority of people are kind of on that journey of awakening to their independence, awakening to their sovereignty, awakening to their true potential. And what we're offering in these conversations is ways that we can empower community even more, to take it to a whole nother level by asking those really potent questions to reflect on a deeper level how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to the world around us, our community. And so I'm really curious on your perspective on this topic, particularly when breaking down, we've become essentially so conditioned to be dependent on external structures. We've outsourced so much of our lives. For example, we've outsourced all our fundamental human needs, such as agriculture, to monoculture farms. We've outsourced our health and well-being to hospitals and doctors. We've outsourced our human rights to these governing powers that be. And we're on this journey as a collective, moving back towards self-responsibility, which you talk on quite a lot in the groups. And I highly encourage everyone who's watching now, go back and watch the previous episodes. In the description, there's a link to become a member of Earth Heroes TV, where you'll get access to all of the conversations Jason and I have had around this. But today, Jason, really focusing on, reinvigorating that sense of independence within oneself. It's that journey of knowing thyself and what we're really capable of. But what is it that how did we get to this point where we've become so dependent? And let's break that down a little bit more, how we've become, dependent on so many external forces to govern our life.
I think it's a default position that we find ourselves in, where we've got, a simple choice at any particular moment in our life to be independent, to focus upon what it is that is within us. And it's a choice that we make at any particular moment in life. What is it that we are depending upon? What is it that we depend upon others to provide for us, where we are avoiding what it is that we have and what it is that is so intrinsically within us for us. It's not about what we should be doing and how we should be living. In my eyes, it's first about creating the habit of the first point of call is myself. That then, what I also feel is lost in our early learnings and the way in which society is presented to us, is at a young age we don't elicit such things as courage and the ability for a young child to have the courage to actually speak what is true to them. What we get them to depend upon is how other people will receive it, whether it may offend them, whether it may be contradictory, whether it may go against certain evidence or what other people that are deemed to be greater experts, as they've been elevated by this artificial society, to say that they know these things, but you do not. And therefore we place our attention upon research and researching and relearning and taking on what other people believe to be true. And then from that particular perspective, we then start to look at ourselves as where do we fit into that, rather than being able to go into what is true to me in this moment, and then being able to develop within our own self, which I think is so important for all children, to actually be able to be encouraged to speak inconveniently, to be encouraged to say what it is that's coming through them, even if it goes against social norms, even if it goes against what manners are. But allow that child to have the courage to explore that rather than tell them what is right and wrong. Because what happens in a community, and most oftenly, and where I believe it's been lost, is it's all about a focus of being common, having a common goal for the greater good. Whereas no community has any strength where there is no independence in that community. A community requires independence of each individual to be able to express themselves fully and openly, that brings a richness and stimulates something that is misunderstood within each of us, to then go, well, rather than stopping it, I don't like that, and that's not okay, to go, well, what that does is that makes me feel something in myself that I'm not aware of. Let's explore that. And it's into the exploration and the independence of our own self to rely upon what we are, to trust in this very nature of our own existence, that in what we are as a creation has every possible thing that we require in order to become what it is that we fantasize about, what it is that we imagine. But where our particular habit is to then reconcile ourselves against how we are received by others rather than how we are received by ourselves. We start moving into this common space. And that goes against the very nature of, why is it that I exist? I exist because I'm different. I exist because I'm unique. And if I'm not bringing that forward and choosing to live from that space, the question comes, am I actually choosing to live? If I'm not choosing to live as all of what I am I committing this silent and subtle and continual level of suicide where I start to deny myself? And that might be challenging for some to say, well, it's not suicide to not do it, but what is it? When I deny myself and my own existence and what it is that pleasures me, what it is that's true to me, what is it that I'm elevating? What is it that I am living for? And that can be quite challenging for some to consider. But truly awakening our own independence, and I'm sure everyone's had this experience, is that when someone actually shows their heart, it might be clumsy at first, it might even be at times reactive. But when we actually allow ourselves to bear witness to someone speaking their truth, there is nothing more that when we let ourselves go of how we may be offended or how that doesn't fit the norms or the narrative that I'm supposed to be living by, in that particular space, I can start to discover what is true to me. And then therefore, when I do that for myself, I then by default start to encourage other people to expose and share their difference.
Yeah, that's huge. It's like this, oxymoron paradox where we are coming from, this origin of being interconnected and being one, and we're birthed into this world, and we have this experience of duality where we're separate and, unique and individual and have our own beauty. But then for only to remember, to go on the journey of remembering that there's this interconnectedness to all of life, which is the quantum field essentially. So it's like this total polarity of existence that we're finding ourselves in the dance between the two. And I love, how you're touching on the aspects of independence in relation to community, and that common union element of coming together for a single cause. And I mean, I'd be curious, to explore that further, particularly when it seems to me that we've become so, culturally, significantly dependent on a system, on the state to take care of our needs on so many levels. And that has, ultimately, that really, short changes ourselves when it comes to times that we're currently experiencing devastation and tragedy and challenging times, because we haven't got that sense of self-sovereignty, which I really want to explore further in this conversation, to really step up in ourselves and have that power and wisdom to be able to make decisions that is going to, serve our community, but ultimately bring the responsibility back to that single point from within again. So I'd be curious, Jason, to elaborate more on that piece, you know, because I personally am an advocate for, you know, being aware of the global situation, the global problems, but then acting locally. Like, what can we do in a local situation, localized communities to be empowered and support one another to take action and move forward that's going to benefit the health and well-being of those around us, including ourselves. And I know that's the work that you do, and you and your partner, particularly in the conscious movement and all the events that you guys are doing and helping serve people. But what's like, I'd be curious to explore that, you know, that dance between the two, between being self-empowered and self-sovereign, and then also being connected and supportive of a localized community.
Yeah, absolutely. I would consider the reality that there is no tragedy, that there is no trauma. It's just my relationship to that experience that makes it so. So let's just say, as it's being presented, not as it may be true, but as it's being presented, that there's a war going on and people are dying. Is that a tragedy, or is my relationship and suppression and attachment to that the tragedy? For example, when we see war, what becomes most valued in our own life is life. When we have you know, maybe something in our own experience from a disease or a condition, what do we become most reflective upon is what I can do. Like, if someone, when we deal with a lot of people with terminal illness, and they overcome it every single time because they stop seeing it as a problem. They stop judging themselves for what they have not done, but to recognize in this particular moment of great pain or despair or tragedy that I feel that I'm relating to and experiencing and maintaining in my space, what it's bringing to my attention is all the possibility of what I could do with my life that I haven't, where I've restricted myself, where suddenly, like someone who has cancer, suddenly stops living by all the rules of, well, I've got to be this type of person, I've got to be that way, I've got to be this to everyone else, I've got to be, and got to be. But it's in that particular moment where some people say, just fuck it. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to make myself happy. I'm going to make my life one that pleases me. And I'm going to do that because I realize I'm the only one that can do that. And I'm the only one that's created the pain that I'm experiencing at this point. That particular grace to be able to realize there's no tragedy, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing bad, but my relationship currently to it creates that. So I would, you know, challenge any particular individual to realize, okay, there may be stories of tragedy, and they're throughout history if we wanted to go into looking at them. But it's also been a great stimulus for people to actually realize the value of what they have as it's been taken away from them. The things that may happen in a loss of a relationship, to realize, oh, well, I could have done this. I probably could have done more of that. I didn't need to be so upset by what they were doing or not doing. When something ironically is taken away from us, is that we start to then see the opportunity that we have. The irony in our own life is through communities, when we can elicit and when we can prioritize an independence of each other, a richness that we all bring, rather than this commonality and this boredom of trying to be the same. It's really important for me to have that point of reference within myself, to be able to hear my own delusions for a period of time and a space long enough that I can actually take it from a delusion into an understanding and start to bring about a life that's never existed. And when we start to engage in ourselves, and what I've observed is, we don't need to fix the disease. We don't need to fix the tragedy. The tragedy, the disease, and the relationship we have with it is a condition of my absence to myself. It's a space that I'm currently existing in. And when I'm in that space, I have pain. I have conditions. I have challenges. I have problems. Rather than realizing it is just a choice that I am not currently aware of. And the question I need to ask myself is, how do I become present? How do I maintain a courage? And how do I create an environment around me which not only supports that, but actually requires and invites it within me? Am I prepared to keep buying into what other people expect of me? I was just as a consideration. We're just speaking to a group before now, and there was brought up an experience of a lady that exposed herself in saying that when she was having sex, her whole experience of an orgasm was nothing. And it was the bane of her existence, because she felt like that there was something that was so glorious and significant that she was missing. And in life, we can go through and release things like our pain, our triggers, our tragedies, and all the rest of it, and we can feel a level of freedom in that, a level of peace. But it's our expectations of what we're supposed to be experiencing. And in the case of this, like an orgasmic experience, it wasn't that that person was incapable. It wasn't that there was something wrong. It was that they were so clear on what the expectations were, what they'd seen from movies, what they'd been told by friends, what they'd picked up at a state of their own innocence and ignorance at an early age of what should be happening. It's the expectation of what I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to be experiencing, which was suppressing and taking away the very beauty and brilliance of what she experienced within her own self, because she was trying to be common and meet up with what other people were doing and have the same experience and the same thing to feel accepted. When she actually released the expectations, and this can be relative to health. For so many of us, we've got this optimal idea of what I'm supposed to do and what I'm supposed to be when I eat certain things. And it's this expectation of what I'm meant to be that it doesn't allow for the native state of my own being to just exist as it is. If I'm not receiving myself, I will continue to keep searching and seeking for the things that I believe I need that are missing in my life. So for that particular lady, when she released not her judgments, not her pain, not the lack of feeling that she was having in that experience of sex, and a very intimate level, when she released the expectations of what it's supposed to be that she wasn't measuring up to, the only experience to have was the one that she was having. There wasn't something she was supposed to be or a place that she was supposed to get to. There wasn't some destination that she was missing or lacking from. And that comes down to a point where when we start to put ourselves first, we start to see where we've put everything else first. And when that's a clear decision we make in your own self, that I am going to live for my experience, live for my life. That requires a whole lot of courage and embrace, a level of love and appreciation and dedicated attention to our own self, to go past the pain or the discomfort of what I've known. I can't look at that. I can't do that because of these reasons and all of the conditioning that's not seen. But when I decide to put myself first, suddenly what becomes evident to me is all the areas where I don't. And what I would suggest is that when people learn how to actually move through their pain, through their darkness, what becomes most apparent initially is all the pain and darkness I have, because I've now discovered within myself how to actually create movement in that space rather than continually possessing it, holding on to it, and carrying it through my life. And then therefore trying to be stronger because I've got all this stuff that I'm dealing with. I've got all this stuff that I experience in my life and my history that I now need to overcome, rather than getting to a place and a realization that if I let go of the expectations of being amazing and brilliant in someone else's eyes, I can become amazing and brilliant in my own as I start to elevate my own voice, my own experience, without some idea of there's an outcome I need to get to, which is a condition of I will take this action so I can get that. That's not life. That's going through the motions. That's when we start to look to other people to say, hey, I've done this, and our celebrations and our growth become something we share with others rather than receive within our own self. So for me, independence, it's very much about a simple choice, which is not elicited, which is not encouraged in most areas of life, is to put ourselves first. We've got this noise of being selfish, which seems to restrict and hold many people back when they start to step into their own path, when they start to engage and indulge themselves. but you can only be discovered by you.
I love that riff, Jason. Yeah, it's powerful perspective to have, to recognize, you know, the potential that we have within us. And just to echo back what you shared, you know, by looking at our own life and doing that kind of work, it takes us to a point where we have to, you know, step up and be strong and let go and move through all of it, rather than just recognizing our brilliance as we are in our state of being. And that's really, really wonderful and powerful. Thanks for sharing. I just wanted to acknowledge, you know, we've got a few people tuning in for the live. Angel agrees with me. She says, amazing. She's tuning in on Facebook. We've got Duncan tuning in. He says, it's the narrative created for us, not by us, and buying into that narrative. It's effectively the outsourcing of wisdom and understanding, contrary to sovereignty, which we want to go into next, like that true self-sovereignty. What does that take in all areas of life? And before we did that, just want to acknowledge Kiela, who's totally agreeing with everything that Jason's saying as well. And this is a really, really important conversation, guys, to have, because it really allows us to recognize our own life and see how we can also step into that deeper process of, you know, examining what choices we're making on a daily basis. And just as Jason had mentioned, you know, that we ultimately have a choice in every moment, that we're coming into more awareness and more consciousness as to what direction and what path we want to be heading in. We could choose, you know, the path of least resistance, or we could go down the path of struggle and challenge and tragedy and you know, confrontation. But ultimately, that's a choice that we get to make. And I'm curious, Jason, to flow into, if someone chooses that path of self-sovereignty, you know, what does that encapsulate? That full independence, you know, from their finances through to their personal health and well-being, their mental state, you know, their relationships, their community. How does, you know, individuals in their independence stand in their integrity in that space of sovereignty?
So to me, I don't ever believe we become sovereign. I believe we're always approaching sovereignty because we're continuing to grow and evolve. So the idea to say that I'm sovereign, sovereignty being the independence of our own being, you know, in whatever way that may be. Now, for me, everything starts with chaos. And when we start to look into a new area of our life and actually give it attention, because just to consider, when we're starting on our own point of growth and we're having our own experience and seeing our own, let's say, coincidences, signals, signs along the way, it's only us that can give attention to that and then validate that, and therefore bring more of that forward in our own life. As we engage in it, more of it appears. But for some of us, the challenge then comes as I start to do that, I start to feel more separated from other people. It's not separation that I believe people are feeling. What they're starting to feel is a greater fulfillment of their own selves. It's an unfamiliar state of where I am coming into all of what I am. And I see this a lot when people start to put themselves first, when they haven't had the habit of doing so, is they feel uncomfortable. They feel like they've just got to be busy. They feel like I've got to do something. We're just speaking to a lady this morning in a creation process. And she said, you know what? I sat there for an hour and nothing was there. Nothing was coming. And by our own degrees of chaos and what we've learned is that we've created a status around being busy, being active. I'm doing things. I've got things going on. There's a whole lot in my life. You speak to people and say, I'm really busy. Everything's going on and it's great. And there's so much occurring, as if it was some badge to wear. But in this particular space of creation, is it more important to have a blueprint of life, an eloquence of wisdom, a receiving of some vault of, you know, intuition that is being downloaded at that moment? Is that more important than an individual being able to trust themselves from a place that they support themselves and believe everything is perfect? Because someone sitting in a space of creation, the intention may be that I want all of this stuff to experience in my life. But what if at first, from a pure space of wisdom where, let's just say, this information is coming from, what if that pure state of wisdom is also aware that you don't trust yourself at the moment? So no matter what information we share, no matter what information is provided, you're not going to act upon it anyway. So is it right at this particular time to give you something where you don't trust yourself, where you're sitting in a space of, let's just go through this experience where you intend to create and nothing arises? Is that not taking away from this habit of busyness and activation and stimulation of the mind rather than the soul in that moment, to be able to sit in that space and go, well, because I believe in myself, because I am at ease with myself, because I'm connected and sovereign to me, and I am my own point of reference, well, this must be perfect. Or I can recognize that in this state of being perfect, what has been highlighted to me is I don't trust myself. I think something's working against me. I realize that maybe there's those other aspects of me as I sit there and nothing comes through at that particular moment, that half hour or 1 hour I've dedicated, that I start questioning, well, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I've lost something. Maybe I'm missing something. That's the gold that comes if you believe everything is perfect and those thoughts appear in this space where you intend to create. What has been exposed to you is, well, I need to develop a greater level of trust because I don't trust myself in being honest. I believe that there's something missing. I believe that I'm doing something wrong, because that is what occurred in that particular state of creation. And that is the particular pathway I'm about to go through, because with my intent to create something significant and phenomenal, I first have to come to a place in myself where I stop looking back, stop questioning, stop doubting, stop fearing. But to first come into the understanding that everything exists to support me. So how is this supporting me, rather than going off from that space where nothing came through in a creation state or a place of manifestation, to then undermine the very intention of what I'm creating in my life? To have one moment, an hour, to then undermine everything that I intend to do. And this is about living again in those expectations of what's supposed to happen. For me, the ability to have humility is not about being meek. Humility is about understanding myself, where I no longer need to convince anyone else of my worth or my value. But from a place of understanding, I have humility and patience and allowing things to evolve as they are. So when I sit with myself in a state of creation to create something that's really significant, maybe I'll need to commit to that for a period of time until such stage that I'm ready to receive, because at the moment that I'm ready to receive, it will appear. So for many of us, when we go back to a point when we start to determine something in our life that we want more, that we want better, that we want to experience something beyond what we currently have, what will be presented always is chaos. And chaos is not a bad thing. Chaos is just the enormity of everything that's available to me when I now bring my attention to creating something. Wow, there's all of this to consider. Most people step over the chaos. They want to take the pill. They want to take the quick way through it. What's the step here? Rather than coming to understand and find their own independence in how they would move through chaos, because it is inevitable in whatever happens in life. Whenever you move into somewhere new, there's going to be more things to consider and be aware of. But the more I come to trust myself, the quicker I eventually start to move through those experiences of chaos and get into what I would say is a state of ease. Ease is a space where I come to accept and realize the enormity of what's available to me. Some may consider that confusion, because confusion is just having more pathways available to me than I was aware of or ready to make decisions upon at this time. But when I can come to ease, it's accepting the good, the bad, the indifferent, the brilliant as it is, without needing, I've got to act upon this right now. At this moment, I'm just becoming present, I'm becoming aware. And when I can get to a state of ease, it's that I can see things as they are. I might not like them, but I'm not going to react to them because I'm accepting them as they are. And from that particular place, then we have an opportunity to connect into that, to direct our attention to a part of that that will become relevant to us. And when we allow ourselves to connect, when we allow ourselves to become present from a state of ease, not from a state of chaos. If we do so from a state of chaos, what we're going to find is we're going to be fixing, changing, healing things that we perceive are wrong or don't support me. It's a very important step that's lost in conscious teaching, is the acceptance, the receiving as a habit of things that don't seem to support me, that are chaotic. But in that habit of receiving that I then develop from a state of ease, and then to receive myself in a state of connection, and then to receive myself in an awareness that may come that may be inconvenient or I've never considered before. I'm in that state of receiving. I'm humble to that I then get understanding, and I'm then confronted with an opportunity to take action, to actually deliver something that is complete, that is whole from me. When I'm in a state of receiving, when I'm in a state of believing that everything exists to support me, the first couple of runs that I go through this, what I would say, these 7 states of awareness, from chaos to ease, to connection, to awareness itself, to understanding that awareness, to then actioning it, to expressing it, to then completing it, to then go back to the chaos. But the chaos now seems less because I've now moved forward on my path, and the chaos that was once there has been reduced because I'm now clearer on the path that I've taken previously and what I've completed. And if we continue on that particular cycle, and if we continue in our own patience to understand that, rather than continually reacting to life, looking for an opportunity, looking for this, I'm not feeling good, now I'm feeling good. I'm up, I'm down. We can understand that those particular states of awareness, ultimately, the more we do that, we end up at a state of presence. And that starts to become autonomic. Once we become more present, we then move into a state of being. And that state of being is where we're allowing things around us to support us and to conspire, because we're clear on what it is that we want to do. The world around us can't support us if we're not clear on what it is that we're intending to create and bring forward. And to the degree that we are not clear on our own creation, the degree that we'll experience in our life is a greater level of chaos, random opportunities, occasional ups, occasional downs, rather than a consistency of an experience in our life where we're not fighting against, we're not opposing, we're not consistently jumping from one thing to the next. We create momentum. And beyond beingness, we start to experience and approach something called sovereignty, where we feel at ease, where we feel present to our own self and the acceptance of that. When we are accepting of that and when we are sovereign, we allow by default and liberate others to do the same, because we don't expect them to be anything less than what they are. And sometimes to invite that, to inspire that in someone else, can be very confronting, because what does it then highlight? If you believe in someone more than they believe in themselves and you invite them to grow, the first thing that's going to come to them is all the stuff they've been hiding away, where they don't believe in themselves, the challenges they've got, the disbelief, the problems, the machinations of their own thoughts that continue to keep going around unaddressed. The more clear, the more of an invitation that is provided to inspire someone to become more than what they are and to actually go for it in their own life. Naturally, by default, brings up all of the things that contradict that. I don't like myself. I don't believe I can do it. I've tried it before. It didn't work. It's only painful for me. People don't understand me. I've got a different condition to everyone else. Whatever those things are, they're just stories. And what happens when we get invited to be more inspired is we have the beauty of something called awareness, which we can be grateful for, that we can actually see the very things that are the nails in my wheel, that are the thorns in my side, that are actually the missing ingredients of my life that continue to keep creating something I don't want. But that will only be done when I approach the question of to truly accept my own inspiration and to create a life not from pain, not in opposition to what I don't like, but to be patient to get to a state of pleasure and then allow the real unity of life to happen that I create from pleasure for pleasure. I'll just finish on this point is pain in the body is an illusion. And I know for many people, they would tell me that that's not true, and I'll tell you what I'm experiencing. Pleasure is the only thing that your physical body has been created for. It is set up in every particular way to experience pleasure. Pain is an experience of deciding that I don't deserve pleasure. It is the absence of pleasure. Pain doesn't exist, but as we continue to focus upon denying ourselves, bringing ourselves down, fearful of how we may be received because we're not receiving ourselves, pain will become a commonplace. As a reminder, when we go deep inside ourselves, that all there is pleasure. All there is joy. All there is a level of love. So how can pain be an experience in my life except for the absence of what I am?
I love it, Jason. That's such a beautiful, beautiful perspective, you know, that ultimately our natural essence is in pleasure, is in joy and bliss and love, and that it's our own stories that prevent us from actually feeling and embodying and being in that beautiful state that we have access to all the time, every single one of us. But it's so easy to simply forget, you know, that that is a part of our fundamental truth. And I agree with Melissa, who's tuning in. She says, I so needed to hear these words today. Trust myself. So it's beautiful to see. And thanks for tuning in to this live broadcast, guys, those who are getting value out of this conversation. We just want to invite you to, you know, share this with your friends, leave us a comment, like the video. But also more than that, if you really feel that, you know, you're also resonating with these words that Jason's sharing, as am I, you're invited to go and join, you know, last night they did a soul navigation masterclass. And so they got another one coming up in 2 weeks, which is a 3-day event. Highly recommend you guys go and do that event. But if you just want to enjoy these conversations, you know, on Earth Heroes TV, you can see we've had these conversations every second week, and you're all invited to come and join us to listen to those further and become a member of the Quantum Movement channel on Earth Heroes TV. It's a beautiful channel. And just wanted to acknowledge Duncan here, who says, the challenge is becoming familiar with myself and not being confused by the avatar. The challenge is becoming familiar with myself and not being confused by the avatar. And the avatar is, you know, a part of all of us who we've all created and what we all are, but really discovering what is it, our true, you know, our true self. And that's what really Jason speaks to. So to close it up, Jason, is there anything that you wanted to share before we round it up? Big thanks to you, man, for taking the time out to join us today.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I suppose, touch on, I think it was Melissa that came up that said something about to trust myself. A big point of honesty in our own life is that when we have this invoked awareness and this freedom in a moment of maybe of our own space where we believe, I want to trust myself. That's what I'm here for, to trust myself. And there's that awakening. Humility is such an important aspect of our own life, is to consider, if I'm having this awareness to trust myself, the starting point is the reality that I don't trust myself. So when I step in to start trusting myself, it is first to accept within me that I don't trust myself. And that when you start to move into trust, I'm probably going to get it wrong. I'm probably going to have conditions of what I used to do. And I need to have patience, and I'm going to trust myself, and I might not get an outcome that is perfectly aligned and that becomes a great story to share with my friends. But in the choice to trust myself must first become the acceptance that I don't. And in the same way that I would nurture someone else's growth, a child, a friend, whatever it may be, is to have the patience that I'm going to continually commit to trusting myself. But what I'm going to learn in the whole process of trusting myself is how much I don't, how much I'm unaware of that. But at what particular point do I stop? I mean, just because the world around you and a majority of people don't choose to trust themselves. They choose from a state of dependency to trust in the government, to trust in the media, to trust in the legal system, to trust in the financial system, to trust in everything else that's there. That for me to trust in myself is to first humble myself and recognize I don't. And I'm going to trip up, I'm going to fall over. And look, the only reason in the consideration of this is people weren't, as an adult, walking around. People that were crawling around as kids, would they ever get up and start walking around? You know, would that ever happen? Are people doing it because that's what they're being demonstrated to do? And it's in the same way, they don't stop at a particular point of crawling. They don't stop at a particular point of stumbling. They get to a state of walking because that's a part of their own experience and existence and what's demonstrated. It's one thing to also then realize, at what particular point do I stop trusting myself, and then how much am I dependent upon whether other people do it or not? So part of the confrontation when you trust yourself is you're going to say things that are going to trigger people. You're going to say things that are going to be inconvenient. You're going to say things that are not normally what you would have said previously as you now step into a place of trusting yourself. Do you deny that because someone else doesn't agree or accept? Or do you use that space to then find an environment that serves and supports you to live a life where you start to create generations beyond you that highlight the importance of trusting myself absolutely? And if that was just a common as our own day-to-day breathing, that we did it without thought, that it became autonomic, what particular existence would you create? Would you need to fix the world? Would you need to fix the government? Or would you start to fix it, address it, live it from a place of the way it's already designed to do, if I just trusted myself?
Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful, and humbling as well, to stay in that space of humility and realization that we're all essentially coming into more awareness and growing together. So Jason, I really want to thank you for joining us, and thanks to everyone who's tuned in for the live session. Again, you can watch the replay on Earth Heroes TV. Otherwise, huge thanks to you, Jason. We do these conversations generally every second week, and you guys can tune in a couple more weeks. We're going to do another live, have another great conversation where Jason shares on these really, really potent subjects. If you're not aware, Jason often does these live videos in their Facebook group, the Quantum Movement. Highly recommend getting involved. And again, the 3-day event coming up, the Soul Navigation series. So big love to you, Jason. Thank you, brother. Appreciate your stuff.
And just to clarify, the groups, there is a quantum movement, but it's a quantum journey is the private space where we share a bit more. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, awesome.
But
No,
thank you.
great.
Thank you so much for all the for creating and actually holding this space.
Absolutely, brother. Big love, and see you soon, eh?
See you later, Shay. Have a beautiful day. Thank you, everyone, for listening.